So I thought I'd follow up my last video with, well, one explaining what are my views on edgy jokes about suicide. Well, not jokes that are specifically about a person's suicide, but suicide in general. So I wouldn't want you guys to get the wrong impression from the last video I uploaded, where what I showed you, that thing that I saw, I thought it was totally unacceptable. It certainly crosses a line. Every single person who left those comments, they all crossed a line, and they really ought to be ashamed of themselves. But comedy is a slightly different, it's a different can of worms. And the way I see it is, life can be rough, it can be brutal, and sometimes you just gotta see the funny side. And it would be hypocritical of me to say, look, I think all jokes about suicide should be off the table, because I grew up watching shows like Mock the Week.
What's that, Joker? You'll be back. Somehow I don't think you will be.
On the subject of abortions, a lot of people support a woman's right to choose. But I think, if I'm paying for it... I'm joking, I never pay. It doesn't cost anything to fall down the stairs, does it? Some of these girls, I swear, they think I'm made of coat hangers.
There was some really dark comedy I grew up with, and you know, life can be brutal, and we need equally dark humor to hit back, because it can help us, well, it can help us bond together, because we're all equal before death. And if anything, if you're the kind of person who can't laugh at the little things every now and then, well, you need comedy. It'll help you become a tougher and more resilient person. Now, this is all completely irrelevant to the story I showed you of that trans teenager who jumped off a bridge. That is not what I consider to be comedy, because first of all, the types of joke I'm talking about, I'm referring to jokes about suicide in the abstract. You know, when it's generalized. And within reason, another thing I should say is, it kind of depends on the person as well. There are some circumstances of people's tragic death which will just, they'll always be humorous. I mean, to give you one example, well, Jeffrey Epstein, there's one example. I mean, considering the filthy things that he did, the terrible things he did, and what he was involved in, oh, I'm kidding. Everyone knows that he didn't kill himself. Yeah. But actually, no. There was actually one very particular story that I wanted to share with you, which I don't know if any of you guys remember. If you can type this in on Google and tell me if it brings any bells. Goonicide. So there was this married man. He was a father of, I can't remember how many children. He drove up to, I can't remember what it was. It was some kind of, it was a cafe, but it was served by girls wearing revealing clothing. Something like Hooters or something like that. He drove up to the drive-thru and he had his pants round his ankles. And the manager who worked there had her smartphone out. She approached him and she saw that he had his pants round his ankles, and she said, "Sir, you need to leave now. That is not acceptable." And he just drove off like that. There's, I've heard conflicting accounts of what happened. Like, apparently he'd been driving up and harassing them. It raises a lot of questions, though, because the guy was married and he was a father. So why he felt the need to do that, Was he not getting enough satisfaction in the bedroom from his woman? I don't know. I guess we'll never know. But he ended up taking his own life afterwards. And I won't lie to you, I feel kind of conflicted. Like, I understand why people are making this, why people made this into a meme and why people were laughing at it. But I find it very hard to laugh when you're in a situation like that, because, well, I guess it depends. If it's true, if he had been going around harassing these women, or maybe there's other factoids, maybe there's more information about the story that I don't know about. It might tip the scales in the other direction in terms of how sympathetic I feel towards him. But as a general rule, I feel like suicide ought to be handled tactfully and carefully. And we should be careful because, well, I feel like if you... Joking about suicide in the abstract is one thing. Joking about an extremely depraved or horrible person who's involved in all kinds of criminal activity, who's victimized a lot of people, like that Jeffrey Epstein. Again, I consider that fair game. But in most other cases, if it's about a very specific person, well, I feel like you ought to watch where you step, because none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. Some of us make mistakes that end up ruining our lives, and we end up dying and in circumstances, and it's like, think about, I don't know what kind of life that guy lived, but it must suck. If there's an afterlife, imagine how many years had he been on this planet for. I forget how old he was. Was he in his 30s or something? Only to die and end up being remembered, to go down in history as the guy with his pants around his ankles, driving up in front of a drive-through of scantily clad women. So I feel kind of conflicted about stories about that too. But again, and I want to relate this to the matter that I discussed in my last video, suicide is, well, it elicits strong feelings within me, mainly because of why it happens. You see, as humans, we have these personal, non-negotiable needs. We need to be loved, we need to be appreciated and respected. We need to feel like we're a part of a community. And if those needs aren't met, well, it makes us feel unworthy and it makes us feel depressed. And I suspect a lot of people who end up taking their own lives do so mainly for that particular reason. And that's the kind of despair, it's under those kinds of circumstances that I just don't find suicide funny or something that you can just laugh about. It reminds me, actually, one of my favorite rock bands is this band, I don't know if you've heard of them, they're called the Smiths. They were huge in the 1980s. They're part of the indie rock scene. And there's a song from their second album, Meat is Murder, called That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. It's a great song. I call it one of their best. Certainly one of their most memorable. It's a very beautifully crafted song. It's a song written from the perspective of a man who just cannot laugh anymore about people who feel so miserable that they just want to end their own lives. I mean, off the top of my head, here are the lyrics to the song. When you laugh about people who feel so very lonely that their only desire is to die, well, I'm afraid it doesn't make me smile. I wish I could laugh, but that joke isn't funny anymore. It's too close to home and it's too near the bone. Morrissey is he's such a poet. He's one of Britain's finest, one of England's finest. You want my opinion on that. But yeah, so anyway, in conclusion, what I want you to take from this video is, I'm not saying that if I were the God Emperor of England, I'd make all jokes about suicide illegal. But I do think that if you make a joke about suicide, especially if it's about another person, I think you should take a moment to look at yourself and think, well, could this be me one day? How would I feel if this happened to me? Because I think about that kind of thing a lot. Perhaps I think about it too often, and maybe that's why I feel so strongly about these videos. I don't take the view that life is inherently good or inherently beautiful and worth living. I mean, life is rough. It can be really brutal, and that's why I think we need to be more compassionate to one another, and we should think twice certainly before leaving crass, vulgar, and ridiculous, retarded memes or comments like the ones I showed you in my last video. Good God, man. Anyway, that's it for this video. Don't die, guys. This has been Tracking. See you guys later.